idea and did not originate with man. It was begun by the Lord and was sanctioned by the Lord and is therefore to be governed by the Lord Himself. It has been announced in previous sessions, in classes and from the pulpit and in our bulletin, that this morning I will begin a series of lessons on marriage and the family. In a recent meeting with our elders, it was the consensus of those elders and of Kenneth and me as we met with them that it was time once again to have some special lessons on the home. I deeply appreciate our elders for many reasons, and one of them being that they are aware that our lives are a whole lot more than what takes place right here in this building, and that periodically it is important for us to restudy what the Bible teaches about our families and our home responsibilities. And that thought prompts me this morning to begin this study in this way. I want to suggest to you some specific reasons why such a study is needed. And I don't do this because I think you're not aware of this, but in spite of your being aware of it, I just think it would be encouraging to all of us to bring these things to the surface in our minds. The first reason that I give to you as to why such a series of studies is needed is because, in light of this text that we've just read, with the awareness that God is the author of marriage, that He's the designer of marriage, we need to study this because God, as the designer of marriage, has some very specific laws and instructions about how He wants us to do marriage. And if we're going to be obedient to God, and we all recognize the importance and significance of being obedient to God, if we're going to be obedient to God, that includes not only doing things like being baptized for the remission of our sins, but it also means, in my case, for me to be the right kind of husband and for me to be the right kind of father. It means that I have to take my responsibility in the home very seriously, because I don't want to disobey God at home any more than I would want to disobey God, say, in an action of worship when I assemble with the church. And since God has specific instructions about it, we need to know what those instructions are. The second reason that I would give to you is this. This study is needed because of the far-reaching consequences from marriage. When you get married, that marriage ceremony has an impact upon a lot of people for a long time. When you get married, there are a whole lot more people involved than just the husband and the wife. There are her parents, assuming they're living. His parents, assuming they're living. Grandparents. 2 sets of grandparents on both sides, assuming they're still living. And if that marital union results in children, those children are affected. There are consequences in the lives of a lot of people. And if the marriage lasts, if you stay together, it has an impact upon a lot of lives for many years. But if the marriage doesn't last, and you don't stay together, then it has an impact, and there are great consequences, even of a negative nature, upon a lot of people for a long, long time. And now listen carefully. The greatest consequence that comes from a marital union is that of the spiritual and eternal nature. Do you remember what Leon read to us earlier? God made male and female in His own image. And that means that the man and the woman who are married are spiritual beings. They are eternity-bound souls. When I deal with my wife, I am dealing with someone who is on her way to eternity, to answer to God for her life. And I need to deal with her with that awareness, lest I become a hindrance to her. I should never intentionally do or say anything that would discourage her in her spiritual life. And when I joined myself to her in marriage, I took upon myself that responsibility. See how there are consequences to marriage? Husbands, wives, you could be a great help to your mate in getting to heaven. But you could also be a great hindrance to your mate in getting to heaven. That's why we need to study this, because it has far-reaching consequences. We also need to study about marriage and the home because of what I call negative cultural influences. There are a lot of influences in our culture today that bear upon our relationships as husbands and wives. First of all, you think of the impact of television and how television presents such a perverted or warped view of marriage and the family. And we don't get the right image from television. It may reflect the majority of society, or it may be that the majority of society reflects the influence of television and movies and so on. But we don't get the proper view of marriage from culture. And in our culture today, it's so easy to get a divorce. In the states with the strictest of laws, it's still so easy to get a divorce. And that is, of course, contrary to the laws and the instructions and the design that God had for marriage. And we should not allow ourselves to fall prey to that influence. And so it's important to get back to the scriptures and see God's design for it, and see that in reality, and this is what we'll deal with more specifically tonight, that divorce was never even intended to be an option in the design of God for marriage. And then I think we need to study all of this because of some very concerted efforts in the world today to change marriage and the home. Why do you think that the state of Vermont, the state of California, the state of Hawaii in more distant times has had items on their ballot sheets about marriage? It's the concerted design of some people today to change marriage so that a man can marry a man, a woman can marry a woman, and that then they can just adopt children. No, they don't usually adopt them. They want to prove as in the case with a lot of radical lesbians, that they can have life without a man. And so they'll conceive a child, as that recent HBO special was taunted, that Ellen DeGeneres and Sharon Stone played the roles of lesbians. Well, they didn't have to play it because they are, but they played that role in that HBO movie, and that they were going to strike a chord for such a lifestyle, and that by artificial insemination that they could have a home without a man. It's efforts like that that call our attention to the need for such studies of doing it God's way. And then the fifth and final reason that I would give to you why we so desperately need to study things like this is because of the profound commitment that goes with being married. I have a question for you. What other commitment or involvement do you ever have in life that is as serious and as long-lasting as marriage? You sign papers to purchase a car. 24 months, 36 months, 48 months. Oh, they'll take you 60 months now. But it's over in a while if the car doesn't tear up first. You sign a mortgage saying that for the next 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, we'll make payments on this house. But that has an end to it. There are only two commitments that we make for life, and that's to follow Christ and to be united in marriage for as long as we both shall live. That makes it awfully serious. And it makes it important for us to study God's design. And with that in mind, turn your Bible to Matthew chapter 19. Matthew chapter 19. Reading from the New King James Version, we begin at verse 3. The Pharisees also came to him, testing him and saying to him, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason?" And he answered and said to them, "Have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh? So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let not man separate." They said to him, "Why then did Moses command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away?" He said to them, "Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery." Now in these verses there are 5 words or phrases that I want to call specific attention to very briefly as we review together God's design for marriage. Back in verse 4, Jesus said, "Have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female?" That, of course, is a part of the reading that we did earlier from Genesis chapter 2, when God said that he was making man as male and female. It's also a part of the reading that Brother Valentine did for us in Genesis chapter 1. And it reminds us, brethren, that God's creation involved God's design for man. And that was for a heterosexual union. In that account in Genesis chapter 2, God said, it's not good for man to be alone. He saw that after he created man. So Adam was already on the earth. But he saw it was not good for man to be alone, reminding us that one of the designs of marriage, when God reacted as he did to man's being alone, is for man to have companionship. That doesn't mean, of course, that a person cannot exist by him or herself, for some people do. The Apostle Paul did. In fact, he viewed himself as being wiser not to marry in view of some very difficult circumstances in which he lived at times with all the persecution upon Christians. So it's not wrong for a person to choose to live a single life. But for the average person, there is a need for companionship that is met in the most intimate of ways when a husband and a wife live together as God intended for them to do. And so God saw that it was not good for man to be alone. He said, I'll find him a help suitable for him. So he brought all of the animals that he had created before Adam. And Adam named those animals. Whatever he called them, that was the name of those animals. But there wasn't in all of those animals a help suitable, a companion that was appropriate for Adam. And so God said, I will make him a help suitable for him. And took that rib from his side while he was in that deep sleep and created woman. Woman, that is from man. And that's why Adam said, she shall be called woman, because she came from me. And God then brought her to Adam, reminiscent of when a father brings his daughter and presents her to her groom and says, you may have my daughter in marriage. God brought that woman to man, and they became one flesh. But it was male and female. The heterosexual union was God's design. A homosexual union was never a part of God's design. And according to Romans chapter 1, verses 26 and 27, when woman leaves man and has her desire fulfilled in a woman, it's called unnatural, and it is called a perversion. And when man leaves his woman and burns in his desire for man, it's called unnatural. It's called a perversion. No matter what man calls it, no matter what people think. And I've had people argue with me about or in defense of homosexual behavior, saying, well, who's to say what's natural and what's not? Well, my answer is the one who made us, the Creator. The Lord God himself is the one. The designer of us is the one who's to say what's natural and what's unnatural, what's a perversion and what's not. And God has said that a homosexual union is a perversion, that it is unnatural and not the way it's supposed to be. Verse 5, Jesus continued saying, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. This is a reminder to us that when a husband and a wife are joined, now listen carefully, that relationship becomes the most important of all their human relationships. Did you listen carefully to how I said that? There's one relationship I have that's more important than my relationship to Phyllis, and that's my relationship to my Lord. But of all human relationships, a husband's relationship to his wife, a wife's relationship to her husband is the most important one. It's more important than the relationship with mom and daddy or to children, if that union results in children. It's more important than the relationship to friends or to anybody. It becomes the primary concern of all human relationships. That's not to say that you don't love your children. It's not to say that you don't love your mother and daddy. It's just to say that your responsibility, your allegiance is first and foremost to your marriage partner. And by the way, did you notice that it says leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife in the King James Version? In the New King James Version, it's joined to his wife. Let me tell you something, just of a brief note. Those words in the English translate a Greek word that means glued. He leaves his father and mother and is glued to his wife, suggesting the permanency of the whole relationship. So then, verse 6, they are no longer two, but one flesh. A phrase that's not used about the father-son relationship or the mother-daughter relationship, but in regard to the husband-wife relationship, it's one flesh. Well, obviously, there is a melding of two lives. There is a meshing of two people in their lives together as husband and wife, but this obviously also refers to that actual or physical sexual union in that moment when their marriage is consummated with the sexual relationship, and that in the most real of ways that they become one flesh. What a very special, what a very intimate, what a very divine relationship God designed for the husband and wife. And therefore, what God has joined or glued together, let not man separate. It was God's design that when you get married, that you stay married as long as you both shall live. It doesn't always end up that way, but that is God's design. And are you noticing? I'm not here this morning to talk to you about the laws of divorce and remarriage and who's eligible and who's not. My emphasis this morning is to you who are not married to know that when you get married, it is to be for as long as you both shall live. And to those of us who are married in this blessed union that we've been blessed with, that it is for as long as we both shall live. And don't take that to mean, well, you're stuck with her, so you might as well just stick it out, I guess, and hang on. No, to the contrary, look upon it in the positive side of the blessing of it. And what a blessing God has given you. And realize that no marriage situation is ever going to be perfect or flawless or without problems. But it just means that when you are aware that you're going to fulfill this commitment that you've made to keep as long as you're both alive, then when the problems come, you work through them. And when a problem is there, you solve it together. And in doing so, you get stronger in your union. And that's why God said, the only reason that I will give to you for divorcing your wife and marrying another is when she has been sexually unfaithful to you. And the same would, of course, apply if the husband were the one that is unfaithful. It's a serious thing. It's a beautiful relationship. It's a divine blessing. And we need to take it very seriously and handle our marriages with care. And in the coming weeks, we'll talk more about God's design for our marriages in the home. Open your songbooks, please, to the number that has been announced.
Speech on. Share or bookmark now playing. Tab bar. More. Tab.
Add control. Selected. Screen record.